The Land Rover Discovery Sport is 10 years old. Is it better than ever? Or should you buy a newer alternative? In this review, we're finding out. Yes, this car was first launched back in 2014, and today this is technically still the same generation of Discovery Sport. But of course, over the years, it has had changes to the lineup. Most notably in 2019, when a facelift didn't really change the look of the car that much, but underneath and inside, things were very different, and mostly all for the better. And recently, it's had some more updates. The changes aren't as big as they have been in the past, but it's most noticeable inside, where previously you had a touchscreen infotainment system and then you had a touch-sensitive kind of setup for other climate control features. Now that's all gone and you've got this 11.4-inch touchscreen infotainment system. Now we've seen a similar move in other Jaguar Land Rover products like the Range Rover Velar, and to be honest, it's a backwards step for usability. Previously, it was very simple to change the temperature and the fan speed with those dials. Now it requires a poke and a prod on this system, which is just much more distracting while you're driving. The system itself is okay. It can be a little bit clunky and there are a lot of menus and sub-menus, a little bit baffling, but you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. Infotainment system frustrations aside, this is still a very nice interior. You've got a brilliant driving position. You feel nice and high up, like you're in a proper SUV. There's loads of adjustment in this seat and in the steering wheel as standard. And you've got sensible, comfortable things like a well-placed, nicely cushioned big armrest here. And again, lots of cushioning for this armrest on the driver's door. And there's a really nice mix of materials in here as well. It's soft touch where it needs to be. It does feel robust throughout. Ultimately, an Audi Q5 and a BMW X3, which are the main premium SUVs that this will be up against, do feel a little more solid in their interiors. But this is still a very impressive premium SUV interior. And it's also great for practicality as well, because under this massive armrest is a huge cubby hole. In front of it, you've got two cup holders, which you can very simply remove and store somewhere else if you want more space in here. In front of that, you've got this hidden storage compartment and some wireless phone charging as well. The door bins are a good size, so in lots of different areas, apart from the infotainment system and the absence of physical climate controls, this is a great SUV interior. Space in the back is very good. There's a lot of legroom here. There's also a decent amount of space for your feet under the seat in front of you. Headroom is also very good. And even if you're sat in this middle seat, things are still pretty comfortable because the seat base is nicely cushioned. There is a lump in the floor, but it's fairly small. The only difference between this middle seat and the outer two is that the seat back does feel quite a bit firmer. You can also slide and recline these seats, depending on whether you want more space in the boot or a more relaxed sitting position. But it's a shame that you need to pay extra to have that function in this car. You also need to pay extra if you want 7 seats in your Discovery Sport. If you pay for that, then you'll get an extra 2 in the boot back there. But just bear in mind that the extra seats you get are really pretty cramped. They're potentially okay for children or very small adults on short journeys, but if you want a proper out-and-out 7-seater, then a Peugeot 5008 or a Kia Sorento are significantly more accommodating in the third row than this car. You can't get 7 seats, by the way, if you go for a plug-in hybrid Discovery Sport. The boot in the Land Rover Discovery Sport is pretty fantastic. In total, we could fit 8 carry-on size suitcases into the back here, so the massive Kia Sorento can ultimately fit more than that, but by plush SUV standards, this is still a very practical space. Just be aware that the figures for capacity quoted by Land Rover are a figure taken from the boot floor up to the roof, whereas most manufacturers take it from the boot floor to the parcel shelf, which is why this might on paper look wildly more practical than all other alternatives, but don't read too much into those numbers. But still, the boot here is very practical with hardly any loading lip at the front, so it's very easy to throw things in and to get them out again. There isn't any underfloor storage, but there is space for a spare wheel. If you go for a 7-seat version of this car, then you don't get a spare wheel, but you get 2 extra seats back here, which fold very neatly and easily into the boot floor. And the overall capacity is the same whether you go for a 5-seat version of this car or a 7-seat one. If you go for a plug-in hybrid, capacity does drop a bit, but we still manage to fit 8 carry-on size suitcases into the boot of the plug-in hybrid, which is the same as any other version with a diesel engine. If you want even more space than this, then you can remove the parcel shelf, Unfortunately, there isn't anywhere to store it in the car, but then you can fold down the rear seats, either from the back or by using some handy releases in the boot itself. And it's also good that you get 40-20-40 split folding rear seats as standard. So you can see with all the seats down, you get loads of extra storage in here. Even with them up, the boot is still very big, and this overall is a practical SUV. There are 3 different trim levels you can choose from, and even entry-level S models are still pretty well equipped. You get things like a lovely interior with a choice of different finishes and colours. You get dual zone climate control, heated front seats, a heated windscreen as well. Above that, there's Dynamic SE, which is probably just about worth the extra money over the entry-level trim. It adds things like a powered tailgate, an upgraded sound system, and adaptive cruise control as well. Above that, the range-topping version of this car is Dynamic HSE, and it pushes the price up again, but doesn't really bring any equipment that's an absolute necessity. So we would stick with one of the 2 lower trim levels, but still consider adding some options, like the 3rd row pack. Now, if you've got the budget and you're desperate for a 7-seat Discovery Sport, then fair enough. But if you're a bit more on the fence about it, then just bear in mind that it's almost £1,500 for 2 extra rear seats that are pretty cramped. If you don't want a panoramic roof, by the way, then it's a no-cost option to have a regular fixed one instead. A 3D surround camera could be a good idea because this is a big car and it will make parking it easier. It'll also help if you're trying to work out if you really will squeeze through the tight spot ahead of you. Less recommendable though is the digital rear view mirror. It's very good, works very well, but the instances when you'll genuinely need it are probably few and far between. When it comes to the engines, there are 3 choices, and the lineup is a little unusual compared to other alternatives. There are 2 diesels and 1 plug-in hybrid. So there's no pure petrol option right now, and of the 2 diesels, neither of them is a big 3-litre 6-cylinder option. In fact, the entry-level D165 looks pretty underpowered on paper compared to other modern diesel engines powering big plush SUVs. So we would point you towards the D200. It's the engine that we've got in this car, and it's absolutely solid. It's quiet, punchy, reasonably frugal as well. The plug-in hybrid is difficult to recommend because it's the most expensive option, and yes, as part of this facelift, it's recently got a new battery and a longer range, but it's only longer by about 4 miles, and overall the pure electric range is still less than 40 miles, so it's not that impressive, particularly compared to this D200, which really is very good indeed, especially if you're looking for a tow car. Another option to consider, by the way, is the dynamic handling pack, and that's not because, as the name might suggest, it transforms this into some performance SUV, but instead because it brings adjustable suspension, which makes this even more comfortable. Without it, the ride can be a bit lumpy around town, but with it, in comfort mode, this is a very nice SUV to do some miles in. It does float and wallow a bit on undulating roads, but it's never enough to feel uncontrolled or uncomfortable. And on the motorway, this settles down really very nicely, and it's also really quiet in here. The automatic gearbox is very smooth. It can, though, be a little bit jerky at very low speeds around town when it initially engages. But for the most part, whether you're in town, whether you're on the motorway, it's very nice driving the Land Rover Discovery Sport. Don't forget that this is fantastic off-road as well. You get 4-wheel drive as standard, you can add things like a wade depth sensor, you can have hill descent control, so it should be as capable off-road as it is comfortable on-road. Price-wise, this is not a cheap SUV, but it's priced competitively against the Audi Q5 and the BMW X3. Now, compared to more mainstream alternatives like a Peugeot 5008, a Kia Sorento, a Skoda Kodiaq, this is more expensive. But it feels more expensive inside and on the road. And also, if you stick to the cheaper versions of this car, then it probably doesn't cost as much as you might think above those mainstream alternatives. And because of the premium image of this car, depreciation should be quite slow, which also means that monthly PCP finance deals can be more appealing than you might think. But the elephant in the room with all products that have this badge is the reliability record. The Land Rover Discovery Sport finished second from bottom in its class in the What Car 2023 Reliability Survey. And Land Rover as a whole finished 28th out of 32 car companies. You get a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty as standard, but there are many alternatives to this car, all of which are built by manufacturers with a better reliability record. So clearly, this will not be the most reliable car on the road. But in lots of other areas, this is a great SUV. It's practical, it's got a really nice interior, it's got a strong diesel engine, it should be great for towing and great for going off-road as well. So the Land Rover Discovery Sport might be 10 years old, but this latest version feels as competitive as ever. Thank you very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there and make sure you subscribe to our channel to see all of our future reviews as soon as they go live as well. And if you want a great deal on your next car, and if you want to read our extended written review of the Land Rover Discovery Sport, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.